Board games, board games, it's what we're talking about in some fashion. Board games, I'm not gonna shout. I am starting off the streaming with a little bit of singing. Look over there, and you'll see a sexy thing whose nickname since childhood was Ding, but their full name is actually Dr. David King. Although Doctor isn't part of their name, they lecture about games. They're lecturing and teaching, that's what they do. They also made some games that might be fun for you. We used to play test together, and we played some of their games together. But we'll talk about those board games. Board games, it's what we're talking about. Board games, I'm not gonna shout. Hey, good morning, everyone, and I am Bez. We are blethering about board games. You can take a bath if you want to. It's entirely your prerogative. And here with me, I have David King. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to have a chat and hear other people's.
And Sate says hello, and you've got some cool background going. Maybe people want to see that a bit more.
Yeah, I can do a background tour. Wait there. Oh, this video is like backwards to what I expect. So we got some prints, some video game stuff up there. Got Kentucky Route Zero and Monument Valley. Big print by Tom Eckersley. He was a graphic designer who used to work at the university I work at, and I've done projects based on his games for my students.
And I agree, this is amazing. Hello, Rob Harper. Hello, Dina. Lovely to see you all. And so are you kind of in an office space in your home? Is that where you are?
I'm in the living room. So there's me and my partner in the flat. We set up our sort of a spare room as the office space. But obviously, like if we're talking to other people, it's really hard to do that in the same space. So I often, when I'm chatting or lecturing, I'll come into the living room and do it here because I don't need to type as much. So it's not as bad on my sort of like wrists and fingers because I'm just chatting. But it's not ideal. I wish I had a more supportive chair. I mean, maybe later I'll start lounging a bit more and get a bit more cozy.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that maybe starting tomorrow, I need to sort out this whole streaming rewards if I can in some manner and get like, okay, sit up straight. And
yeah, like if I start straight, I'll disappear off the top.
I'll maybe talk about that for the last half hour. We'll kind of start winding down a little bit earlier than usual and talking about stuff. And I will talk a wee bit about all the chaotic shenanigans that I'm planning over the next couple of weeks. But just to reiterate, Ding and I do know each other. We're both based in London for a good portion of the year, let's say. And Ding is a lecturer. I moved to London years ago, and we met at Royal Festival Hall, where I started up a playtest along with David Brain and Ben Neumann, who now lives in America. But Paul Mansfield, Ellie Dix, all sorts of lovely people come here. Xate's been there. I think Rob came there. What? Did Rob come? I don't know. But anyway, Fridays, when things are working again, hopefully we will be able to resume one day. I know Tiz sent a message saying, hey, are you planning to resume this either virtually or in real life? I miss you all. I said, look, honestly, I don't have any desire to resume it virtually anymore. I think that we can't capture the experience, and there are many online playtests that you can go to. I don't think you need I don't think it's worth having a direct analog and saying, okay, let's do stuff in the closest possible manner. It's like, let's make it work for the new format. And hopefully one day we will be able to go back. Anyway, the point is that also we are biased because David King actually invited me to give a guest lecture at the university where I talked about emotions in games, and then I gave a very similar lecture at Essenspiel. I should say, sorry, I've forgotten the technical name, and also I think at Dragon Meet, yep, and it was an interesting talk because afterwards I got to hear other people and what they thought. And yeah, we'll talk about lecturing, we'll talk about what games we love, we talk about who else Ding is, and let's talk about nicknames to start off with, because what is a nickname?
I guess it's sort of like a variation on your given name, or maybe it's a name given to you by your friends, and how much say you get in that probably varies on who your friends are. Because I know I've had friends in the past who've wanted to give themselves a nickname, but and it's not always worked. The nickname that they're given tends to stick a bit easier than the ones that they pick for themselves. But yeah, when I was younger, and the friends I used to hang out with had this habit of just squishing words together, like any words. So instead of saying like going to the shops, you'd just say gops. And I'm just looking around me for like words to sort of think about. Like Christmas tree would be gree. Like any words. And so like it happened with my name. So David King got squashed and became Ding. And that's what people called me for since I was probably about 15. And depending on how old my friendship group is, or how old, like how long the friendship is, depends on how likely it is that people will call me Ding or David. And then I think it was when I went to uni, and the nickname stuck because my old friends met my new friends, so that stuck. And it was probably when I went on to do my masters that like I had a big shift in sort of the people I was seeing, and like then onto my PhD, where I didn't feel it was appropriate anymore to really introduce myself as Ding, and in a sort of more professional environment. So around sort of like early 20s, I sort of reverted back to David. I mean, I'd be David to like doctors and stuff. It was only really sort of friends. And then
it's a weird one because it's very much what persona you're portraying. Because if I'm in a bank or if I'm in the queue at the airport, I will be Behruz, Behruz the Shahriori. And if I'm pretty much anywhere else, I'll be Bez.
Yeah.
And yeah, then it's an interesting one. People, the thing which something is called kind of says so much about the caller, if you know what I mean. And for the purposes of this game, for the purposes of this show, I should say, is it professional? Is it unprofessional? Is it just a chaotic bunch of ramblings with two crazy people shouting at each other while we're definitely not shouting? I kind of promised that right at the start, but maybe speaking with heated passion and fire between us.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's whatever. You are a lovely person.
Yeah, I guess since I started making games more publicly, I started using David in that sense. So like I started using David more. So I guess that's sort of like, I see that like as a part of my profession as a lecturer, sort of making games, like the practice of making. I really feel strongly that if I'm teaching students how to make games, I have to be making games myself. I'm still learning. I just have to stay a little bit ahead of my students. I mean, as long as I'm a little bit ahead, we're okay. It's when I get behind. But then actually, to be completely honest, like if students come out of the course knowing more than me, then I think I've achieved something. I've either given them space or support to grow and flourish, and they have something that I don't have, which is a bit more time. So like my time is not spent constantly making. My time is, in a professional sense, is spent thinking, how do I teach other people to make things? How do I teach them to make games? And that's a slightly different sort of frame of thought that you have to go through. Because when you're making stuff yourself, you can take lots of shortcuts and stuff that you already know in your head, that through like years of practice, you know, oh, I don't need to draw this diagram now because I get it. I know what it's going to do. But we teach students to sort of have a process and a development log. And it's kind of interesting. We also get them to finish their games, where I don't
actually
finish my
finishing,
games.
Not just being, okay, start this game because that's going to be the tempting thing. But let's hold off on that a wee bit. Yeah. I just want to ask the one question before we get to the question, and then I'll ask all the other questions that everyone's been asking during in 5 minutes. I want to ask, if one of your students happens across this video, and they started then calling you Ding, would that be annoying?
Yeah, I don't think it'd feel right. I sort of like, although I try to be courteous and polite, and I say like friendly, but with like a kind of a double meaning, in that I don't think whilst we're in a teacher-student relationship, it is suitable for us to be friends in what you'd traditionally mean by that word. I've certainly got on to become friends with students once they've completed the course and stayed in touch with them, and some of them have gone on to sort of like be making board games or escape rooms. And that's one of the things I like about the course I do, is that it's quite medium agnostic, in that they don't just make video games, they can make any form of game. But I keep in touch with them afterwards, but it takes a little bit of while, and you have to have a bit of separation of time, I think, before you can go from being friendly to being friends with students. I think you need to have that professional boundary. There is, as much as you can be nice and helpful, there has to be that dynamic, because there is that power imbalance, and you can't escape that power imbalance, where at some point I have to sit down and look at their work and determine that I think that they've met the learning outcomes. And if I was to be friends with them at the time, that would be really difficult. So I have to
there
keep
would be a lot of bias coming in there, and it's difficult, like when you've got relationships. But let me catch up a wee bit of the chat. Obviously, we've had a lot of talk about you being royalty. Rob's not been to the Friday daytime playtest, and Xate says, "Oh, definitely go when it's on again, and also try the Korean barbecue burrito from the stands outside at lunch break." So yeah, on Fridays there is a bunch of vans. And yep, Rob saying about King David in Scotland. Dina asking, does your beard take a lot of upkeep?
Funnily enough, I mean, I've been on a journey with facial hair, and for a while, like my beard was quite a big part of like my persona. Like I made it a part of my persona, I think, having a beard. And then it was probably when I was around probably my mid-20s, I started growing my beard out. So as you met me when I had a much larger beard, and sort of the original journey of the beard was I can't be bothered to shave. Like it's a faff, it's a hassle to keep clean shaven. So then I was trimming it, and then it's like trimming it's a hassle. So then I let it grow out, but then it got to the point where actually this is becoming a hassle. like because it needs more upkeep. Like once you get like, because I had a beard like sort of this kind of size, and that took upkeep, and now I'm just sort of last year I just went, it's time, and it was kind of a big decision because there was sort of like 2 or 3 years worth of sort of growing out this big beard, and then I was just sort of like, it's time to trim it off. And I think in trimming it off, I also trimmed off about 5 years from my face. So it was a good way to sort of feel slightly younger again, or look younger for a little while. So that's a good trick. If you can grow a beard, grow it for like 5 to 10 years, and then shave it off and feel a bit fresh-faced.
Yeah, so a very, very long sort of growth cycle, let's say.
Yeah.
Rob's mentioning that they're going to have trouble getting into London because of where Rob lives. Of course, whilst it's fun, I think that if you're traveling, hours in, having said that, it did take me an hour and a bit myself to get there. But if you're coming from really far away, it's like, whoa, you're building up expectations. And look, I'm not going to say that it's the most amazing thing ever. It was just a nice bunch of folk and playtesting, and it was nice. And so it's not like, oh, everyone should definitely come over here. It's not like, I don't think there is any holy grail of, even if you hear about, oh, this amazing playtest group that Gil Hoover runs, oh, this amazing playtest group that Emma Larkins runs, I don't think any of them are really that amazing that you have to make a pilgrimage or anything like that. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, from my experience, the reason I picked it was because it was near where I worked, so I knew I could get to it, and that was the reason that I started coming. I was looking for people to playtest with. I went online, found this group, saw that it was a place I could get to easily because it wasn't much further from where I'd normally commute to get to work. So yeah, and I also think there's like, it's nice if you, I mean, it depends. Hopefully you can, I think there's people making board games all over the place, all over the country. And I think if there isn't a place already where you are, like, I'm sure you could be the one to start it.
And I know that obviously we are blessed in London that, well, during normal times that you're able to meet, at least there's a lot more people who are amenable to meeting. And in a city with a good few million people, it's more likely that you'll find at least 5 designers willing to playtest some games, compared to if you are in a city with only 1 million. Like even Glasgow, even though there's a lot of stuff. And yeah, Rob makes a fair point that obviously something really nice is when you go to actual conventions and stuff, and you can play with normal gamers. And for sure, the original version of Yogi in a bind, and what I'd really like to get back to doing is to going into pubs and saying, hey, would you playtest this? Or at a game, yeah, frankly, if I'm having people over to my house, I used to have people over literally every Thursday. That's the way it was from like, I was growing that, and then back in February, it was literally every Thursday, like that I'm in London, you come over, and from like such and such a time, I started off saying it was from the early afternoon, but not enough people turned up for the early afternoon. I thought, okay, well, if people want to join in, I'll still be ready for the early afternoon. If you want to join at 2 p.m, if you're not working, if you are working towards the night, then pop over. But yeah, doing what Bruno Feduzzi does and mixing that playtest with normal game playing or reaching out to people, I think that's a really valuable thing. And Rob makes a really pertinent point. Anyway, moving on, I think that I should ask, what are your Recent highlights, living life and seeing the sights. Recent highlights, playing games and other delights. Or all recent highlights, all recent events, or other stuff. Even if it's bad, let's talk about the experiences you've had. I'll turn that into a song later. But yeah, what has been happening with you?
I think one thing that has happened is, and it's sort of a continuation of what I started recently doing in the before times, where I'd started. I found a group of people. I say a group. There's me and two others, and we started playing music together. And we would go to a local practice room, and we'd take along our instruments and start making noise together. And it was very much under the ethos of let's never try to write a song, let's never hope to perform in public, and let's not call what we're doing music, let's just call it noises. And it was in a sort of like an effort to remove all the pressure of performing a song, a sort of a piece of music, and just saying we're performing noises. It removed a lot of pressure in terms of having to perform a certain way. And I mean, okay, and we've all played music in the past, and it is probably music, but I think changing the terminology actually was quite freeing. So we were doing that about once a month, and then obviously we couldn't meet in person anymore, but we found some software that allowed us to do it online. But I mean, this might, depending on how much people are into music and playing this might be a bit strangely technical, but because of latency when you're playing online, you can't play in sync with each other. So the software that I use is called Jamtabber, and it allows you to purposely play like a whole bar out of sync. So what it does is records what you're playing, sort of buffers it, and then plays it back to everyone, but one whole bar later. So everyone is playing like one or two bars out of sync with each other, but you're all technically, because you're a whole bar out of sync, you're actually, the first beat lines up, the second beat lines up, the third beat lines up.
Jamtabber.
Yeah, Jamtabber 2. And it's got a curious interface. I wouldn't say it's the best interface design, but like the fact that it's allowed us to keep playing every couple of weeks together has been a really good highlight for me, like a consistent highlight in terms of still getting to play again, play music. So I used to play drums, but in London I don't have space in my flat. So like,
and not to mention that you're going to have difficulty with neighbours. They're going to be living a bit closer.
Yes, yeah, they don't appreciate it, I don't think. So we could do that in the studio.
I used to be a drummer, and I was going to say, the only way I ever practiced on proper drums was either in a practice studio or when we were playing live. That was it. When I was in the house, all I was doing was basically practicing on pillows.
Yeah. When I was in, I say like when I was in bands, like I'm talking about like we played in our local town, and we set up our own shows and stuff, which was one of the advantages of not being in a city. Like in a city, there is sort of like there is a scene that you join. So you're in a band. You go to, at least my understanding, I might be misquoting on this, but you'd go to venues and they'd have people who put on nights and you'd ask to perform. But we were in a small town in Whitby, and we created our own music scene, our own gig scene, by just going to local pubs directly and saying, can we put a night on? And it's sort of like, it's kind of interesting that it transcended like maybe 6 or 7 years of like school age groups. So like if you think about when people were in, sort of people would probably start like A levels, and they'd be the ones who were in charge sorting out the gigs, and they'd leave to uni but then still come back occasionally and play. and then the next group would go up and they would be the ones in charge, sort of getting some of the old guard back to come and perform, but getting new people in. So this passing of the torch in terms of organizing gigs. People who had cars would drive all around the countryside, picking up people's amps and drum kits and setting them up. So it was really sort of communal and exciting to be not just turning up and doing it, but being part of the organizing of it. But yeah, I stopped playing music for quite a while, not out of choice really, just out of
well, there's so much to do in life. I mean, and you can't do everything that you love. I mean, we love a million things, but it's a mixture of what is a priority, but also in some sense what makes money, and what do we have to focus on, to what do we really want to master, because you're feeling a need to master the art of lecturing, of making board games, to stay a little bit ahead of people and all this stuff. And I do want to say a quick hello to Alex, who sorry, it's a bit delayed, but talking about latency, it's just, someone pops in, they sidle in for a while, Alex is kind of waved and slipped into the seats, and then we kind of have our wee chats, and later on it's like, yeah, it's lovely to see you here. Thank you for joining us. Even if you are, doing all your Christmas shopping, that's totally fair. And very appropriate sounds. But yeah, oh, whoops, I didn't mean to click that one. But yeah, is that banner correct? It should actually be from the 22nd. I'll change that one. Yeah, tomorrow's going to be when the chaos really starts. And you know what's inspired by you? Tomorrow I'm just going to be making noises. I really like I will be performing it for other people, but I'll be performing noises, and I'm not going to claim that it'll be good in any way. And I will be doing that for at least an hour. And yeah, we'll see what happens. Because I really like the notion of reframing things. It's like this kind of ties into, and by the way, everybody else, if you've got any other recent events, highlights, achievements, feel free to put them into the, depends on where you're watching, but into the chat. So, yeah, my point is reframing something. If you're making a game, you can reframe it to be, okay, maybe I'm not making a game. Maybe I'm not making something for publication. Maybe I'm making, what is a game? What is worker placement? Okay, worker placement is this thing, but what if worker placement is about, what if I want to, I don't know, these terms, they come with their own baggage. And sometimes if you want to break free, it can be really difficult. But if you want to say, okay, I want to make something interactive, that is not a game. And sure, but it feels playful. And I want to make a playful activity that is not a game. What can that be?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that you've mentioned that, because I do think of when I'm working with students that I often sort of, I think I surprise them. I'm not sure, but I often ask them to make playful experiences, and like I know, so this is for digital games as well. And when you're sort of learning to program, I think you can relieve quite a bit of the pressure in learning to program by not trying to think about how do I design a game, and you sort of get all these ideas of what a game should be. Like, oh, a game should have levels, it should have points, it should have lives, it should have these. And I'm trying to get them to either push against that to try different forms of play, or if they're learning, I think when you're learning, you can really strip it down to sort of like small ideas. So, for example, if you're learning to code, I would just sort of say, make a box that changes color when you put your mouse on it. And that's a little playful interactive experience. And learning lots of those and then how you fit them together gives you sort of more complex forms of play. But you have to start at the beginning, really. But like, yeah, I think I talk about play or making playful experiences more than games. I think games comes with a lot of baggage in the terminology and how people think about it. And similarly, the students have been making 18 games with 18 cards in them. And again, card game comes with baggage in terms of suits, numbers, collecting sets, discarding, shuffling, all those sort of preconceived ideas of how cards connect. And it's sort of like trying to think about the difference between
like what's if the cards have slices in them and then you put them together like a dexterity game?
Yeah, or even just like cards of ways of holding information. Like you think of like Trivial Pursuit. It's not a card game, but the game functions with cards in that they have information on. They've got two sides with like the answers and questions on, and yeah, like Dobble is kind of like a snap, but you're looking. They've got information on them, and it's about searching for that information. You're not really sort of creating sets or anything. So it's trying to.
I mean, like for sure, if you're, I don't know if you're like. I don't know how everyone else in the audience feels, but as far as I am, like, you're totally preaching to the converted. So, for sure, if you are making a cards game, you can do anything with that. If you're making a board game, what's the board for? If you're making a tile placements game, okay, maybe that means you put things. It's like, and for sure, these terms can free you. Like, I still feel like building blocks of tabletop game design, I think that's in the top few board game books that I've ever read. And I would heartily recommend it to everyone because understanding these terms and what they can do and having examples of them does kind of help you see where we've been and kind of think a little bit about where we might go. But at the same time, to paraphrase someone else, I want to break free. Anyway, but talking about the recent highlights and events, and obviously coming up, you see the different background for those who didn't watch yesterday. I explained that. Watch the first 11 minutes of yesterday's stream for details on my journey and recent highlights. I did read a couple of comics. I read, again, the Arts of Usagi Ojimbo, which has a few actual words in it. It starts off with, hey, here's how I make this comic, and here's some like pages that were never widely shared, and here's some recreations, and it's now gotten me excited to read that. I also read half of Calvin and Hobbes' So Wonderful World, which is the final one, which I got rid of most of my Calvin and Hobbes collection because I don't feel like I need all of them. But that is Bill Watterson just before they finished. And reading it again, it makes me realize how much deep philosophy there actually was. And a few of the strips I just do appreciate at a level that I maybe wasn't able to do 10 years ago. And it's a truly lovely thing. The other thing is kind of having that chat with parents and negotiating, okay, what's safe and what's comfortable, but I'm not going to talk about that right now. If anyone else wants to share any of the recent highlights, then feel free to do so. But let's move on again to our brilliant thing. What's the little thing, which is brilliant. What's the little thing, which is brilliant?
What is my little thing? The seaside.
Yes, the seaside. Yes, the seaside. I love the seaside. And Ding came up with this notion, which, I mean, are we talking rocky seasides or sandy seasides, or just the stereotypical British seasides? Are we talking like Brighton? Are we talking like Piers?
So like I mentioned before, I'm from Whitby in the northeast, which is a small tourist and fishing town, but it's sort of quite old and traditional looking, I guess. And we have a sandy beach and a cliff face. So like I can't help but escape the notion of the seaside being my hometown. Although I do like anywhere that's sort of like by the sea. I prefer sand just because it's more comfortable to walk on, like barefoot. And I could just sort of stand like maybe knee to thigh deep in seawater for like hours, like just stand and look out to the sea and just sort of like let my body slowly adjust to the temperature of the sea. Like even if it's cold, you get used to it after a while, as long as you're not sort of, even if you do dive in. I always regret that I haven't taken some swimming like gear so I could just jump in the sea fully. I mean, I could with my clothes, but if I don't have a spare change, it's going to be an uncomfortable journey home. But yeah, I could sit at the sea. I think there's something about maybe there's something about borders and or boundaries between spaces. So you're like between land and sea.
Like the boundary between land and sea, it's never quite clear, is it? I mean, okay, with a cliff, you've got pretty much, what it's a nanometer where, okay, this is land, this is just empty air. You can define that. But with the seaside, I mean, even if you take a snapshot, let's ignore the fact that the waves constantly coming and going and stuff all. And if you take a snapshot of time, it's like, okay, this is land. Now this is wetland. And this is kind of got like maybe a millimeter of water on it. And then it carries on growing and growing for maybe a mile before you would say, yeah, this is properly now the sea.
Yeah. I always keep and sort of
also,
like.
By the way, what I'm learning is that you really should. How do you have a car? Like, I feel like what you want to do is like in your bag, like whatever your bag is, just kind of buy a pair of swimming trunks and always have some swimming trunks in your bag, just like in a secret pocket.
I mean, yes. I mean, depending on the type of swimming trunks, they're not very big, are they? It depends on how brave I'm feeling. But yeah, I mean, I should just remember to go. I mean, not to go, to actually to take a pair of shots. So, like, I don't think I'd normally go see the sea a few times a year, and this year I haven't been able to, and I've really missed it. And I think I didn't realize until like the last few years how important the sea was and the seaside, but like just my sense of well-being, like the air just seems fresher. It's got its own smell. Yeah.
It's true. It's spare underwear is multifunctional as long as it doesn't turn translucent into water.
Yeah. Carefully curated underwear choices. Yeah. And yeah, I'm looking forward to going back and just standing at the borders, at the boundaries between land and sea, and staring out for a while, and then hopefully not getting like cut off by the sea coming in if I stand there too
long. And Alex saying you should always know where your towel is.
Yeah.
And Rob saying, amazing how many emergencies spare underwear is useful in. And I just made 2 Brits say underwear instead of pants. That is my recent highlight. I mean, underwear is a bit more
generic,
Brits.
General, yeah.
Okay, apparently I'm a Brit. Let's get to that in a minute. As one of the questionably quick questions, because I would like to. That's basically what I'm saying. It's more generic and it's more inclusive in some ways, because pants to me is a specific type of briefs. Like, okay, briefs are a type of pants, and Y fronts are pants. A G-string isn't really pants.
I wouldn't say boxer shorts are pants.
That's what I was also thinking. Like boxer shorts, I don't think are really pants.
We need a diagram.
Pants, it needs to be like kind of a groinal area for it to be pants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think some diagrams need to be drawn. There needs
I'm sure
to be
someone on the internet
already done it. Yeah. A full study.
It's like, this is box like kind of with the different terminology and what defines things. But okay, we've already answered that question. Brilliant things. Seasides are brilliant. Gazing at the sea, seeing the rolling sea, watching things, negotiating that. One of my most favorite memories is on the island of Koh Phi Phi in Thailand, wandering around a rocky shore and seeing all the crabs scurrying around and making my way around. I want to say maybe a quarter of the way around the island. Koh Phi Phi, for those who don't know, is almost shaped like a butterfly. So you've got this central, more like a bow tie, let's say, because the butterfly actually has the body. So it's more like a bow tie and then you've got this tiny little bit where all the people live and where there's a lot of touristy stuff, a lot of tourist hostels and whatnot. And then you've got this side, which is all the hills and mountains. You've got this side, which is also lots of hills and mountains and forest, and just kind of going around the shore and seeing everything. It was lovely. And going from Dover and seeing, even though it's not really the seaside, seeing that boundary. And maybe we're not adventurous enough to actually just be completely surrounded by sea, but getting on that ferry to Essen, for me, when I think about it, yeah, actually, that was a highlight. Going to Kent, that was a highlight. And I'm sure these days will come again. And if you really want, we could drive right now to the seaside, not together, but, individually.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't have a car, so it's either a very long walk or maybe not shorter cycle, but shorter in terms of time.
I mean, I have cycled to Brighton. From South London, it's like doable within a bit less than a day. So you kind of stay there and then you have most of the afternoon to hang out. And then this is where the plan kind of falls down. Like if you don't have a motorized vehicle, it's going to spend 5 hours going there, 5 hours coming back. That's like, you're going to be knackered by that.
Maybe I'll stand in my bath. I'll put my feet in my sink. Put some salt in a bucket.
To recreate that experience.
And close my eyes. And just get someone to shake the bucket. So it's like...
So let's move on again to questionably quick questions. So we always start off. David King, where exactly are you?
Where exactly? Forest Hill?
So for those who don't know, that's in the southwestern parts, southeast of London.
Southeast, yeah.
And what time is it, local time?
10:42, according to my computer.
Same as it says here, because this is a very UK-centric stream so far, it seems. I mean, obviously, I appreciate the Finnish people and the German people in the audience, but it's just natural that when you start something at 10 a.m. UK time, there's a lot of British people around. What is a typical day like for you recently?
So I wake up normally before my alarm. So I'm normally sort of waiting for my alarm to go off or sometimes I even just get up before the alarm and then turn it off. But it's nice to know it's there just in case. Get ready, log onto the computer, and so it's either teaching and supporting students for probably half the day. So that involves sort of a mixture of doing lecturing, so like me sat in front of a camera talking to them, presenting slides and showing them some information, and that, or doing support, so I can talk to them one-on-one if they've got any problems, or alternatively, occasionally it's them talking to me and presenting information to me, which I like, and then I can give them feedback. And then doing some wonderful administration, just hours of sorting things out. That's the highlight of my day. And then afterwards, a cheesy film in the evening. So like now we're in December, it's become Christmas films. which has been nice. I do love. This year has been my year of the 6 out of 10 movie. I have just accepted that I can't handle at the moment good films. Like, and when I like, do you know, like, good films in terms of sort of like they normally have like that sort of undertone of some sort of gritty or realistic sort of poignant point or some message. And I just sort of like, I either just want to watch some cheesy rom-com, which just follows all the beats of every other rom-com, or some action film where some stuff gets blown up and there is cartoon style violence. So not like, so like action films have cartoon violence, I think, in terms of sort of like, it doesn't
get
feel
what you mean.
realistic.
Like,
it isn't gritty.
It doesn't explore the after effects of that violence. I guess that's almost what. And I want to, apologize to Yoda, where I said, Finnish people, German people, but there's no Dutch people. No, I definitely can't see any Dutch people in watching. I'm so sorry, and thank you for thank you for lots of love to Dutch Yoda. But tell us something about, where are Dutch people from? Netherlands, right?
I'm going to just nod gently in case I'm not actually right. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's the Netherlands.
Okay. Okay. Muffled sounds of cartoon violence. So, tell us something about, is it the Netherlands? I'm sorry, my geography is so bad. But going back to what you were saying about having, okay, you're doing this work, you're feeling stressed out because of the way that the world is, presumably, and what you want is something simple, that you're just, hey, I don't want to explore the gritty after effects of, all these things.
Yeah, sort of like, I mean, and there's a lot of good film, and the thing is, there's sort of like, I can't remember who drew it, but someone drew like a chart which was 2 axes of quality. One is sort of like critical acclaim, but then the other one is just how good it makes you feel. So you can watch a movie that is critically acclaimed, but it doesn't necessarily make you feel good. And it can be, you can have a good film that doesn't make you feel good, and you can have a critically bad film, but it does make you feel good. Or you can just have a very bad film which is both critically bad and doesn't make you feel good either. So like the 2 axes of quality is interesting.
I kind of feel like critically acclaimed is a Bacon thing. It's completely ridiculous, and look, I don't think something being critically
isn't the right word, but
I would almost put it to how good it makes you feel in the moment versus how much it maybe improves your life a year from now. And that's almost how I would almost frame it, because me watching a documentary or me watching something that really has some deep emotional significance, maybe that might resonate with me. Maybe that gives me a deeper understanding of the world. And a year from now, I might really feel like it's improved my life. But there's stuff that's, okay, I'm struggling to think of the names, because that's the way that these sorts of films are. They're very disposable. You watch them and then they give you some popcorn fodder in the moment. You enjoy them and they do at least make you feel better, so that by the time the credits roll around, you're feeling a little bit better than when you started watching. But a year later, is it going to be an improvement? No, I would almost put those as the 2 axes.
That's interesting, yeah. I can see that making sense. It's sort of, I guess it depends how you look at the craft of film, because I think, I mean, and the problem is, like, there is this sort of like language that's built up around filmmaking, And when you sort of like, again, it goes to terminology and expectations. So like when you say this is sort of like a critic's film, what does that mean in terms of sort of cinematography, editing, lighting, dialogue, message and meaning and themes and topics and ideas? And yeah, I mean,
even with
like
a critically acclaimed thing, it's not always necessarily going to be because it has a deep emotional impact. I mean, God of War, as I understand it, one of the reasons why it was adored by so many reviewers was partially because the company that made it was like, you know what, we're going to just shorten everything. We're going to make it a short, intense experience. And for a lot of people, maybe who are buying a £50 or more game and then feeling like they need to get hundreds of hours of experience from it, well, that might not be the best thing. But for reviewers who are struggling to play all of these games, this is something that they can go through and enjoy the entirety of. And it's just a more intense, focused experience. And that's itself, even though that is all about the short-term enjoyment rather than any long-term changing you as a person or anything like that, it's something that was critically acclaimed.
Yeah, yeah, maybe I'm getting tripped up on terminology, but I do like what I do.
I
like
don't
what
want
you're
to
saying.
have a. I'm not trying to trip you up on semantics.
No.
It's just like an interesting thing to delve
thought.
into, I feel.
Yeah, I think what's like talking about the length of games is interesting because I just find myself both for digital games and non-digital games wanting shorter experiences, shorter and shorter. For digital games, I want a shorter experience so I can play more different games rather than just having. For some people, and that's what they want, having one or two big games a year. That's really good. They get to sit and play that game, rinse every last second out of it, repeat it, or play it again and again with friends, or they're playing this like one open story, open world game, and they're adventuring through everything. But I think for me personally, I like to see how mechanics and systems and stories and messages are sort of made, and I can get a good idea of that, or I can get the complete idea of that quicker if the game's shorter, and then I can play another thing. And in terms of board games, I'm normally the one who ends up explaining the rules to my friends, and I don't want to have to explain I don't want to spend half an hour explaining how to play something to find people don't like it. I want to spend a minute explaining something, 5 minutes to get an idea of if it's good. And if it's good, if it's a short game, even if it takes half an hour, you'll play it 4 or 5 times in a row. And you'll still get that same fill of time. But then if it hasn't worked, it's like, oh, this isn't working for this group. You can move on to something else. Like some of these big games, which I'd probably enjoy if I played with the right people and someone else taught me how to play them. But that's an investment. Like when you're investing 2 or 3 hours into a single game and you sort of feel like, oh, I haven't really understood it. I need to play it again to really get it. But when am I going to find 3 hours with the same group of people and not have someone else who's new to the group? So it depends on like what your social dynamics are. And who you're playing your games with. Like if you're playing with the same people, like maybe you're playing with your housemates and you want a long burning game that's sort of like epic and like you're going through a big campaign, or maybe you're just meeting your friends in the pub and you want to shout a bit and slap cards on the table and make some noises, or you want a little puzzle or a little engine that you can move around.
Yeah, it is interesting because I tend to the same side. I tend to be, okay, I want this game to be as short as possible. And everything should be as short as it can be without sacrificing what it is. That's the important part. I mean, you could frame Pandemic Legacy Season 1 as, okay, we played this about 17 times, maybe 34-ish hours that we played this one game. It just happens to be broken up into chapters. And that was a really intense experience. And because of the length of that experience, we were able to explore a whole bunch of story beats going forwards. That's okay. People come in, people develop relationships. I mean, yes, in a very mechanical way, when someone's, okay, that sibling or these people are rivals or whatever. And then you've got one housemate who's all about the play acting and the role playing, making a thing about this, which obviously makes the games longer, but makes them more enjoyable, and we're able to share that experience. I mean, Dungeons and Dragons, role playing in general, it's all about developing this massive narrative, this shared experience. And for sure, after that, I would say that before I was already quite close to Chris and McCall, and it was a way to get to know one of my housemates. It was a way that I became friends with another person, and at the end, we all felt a little bit closer. We felt like we'd gone through this process of learning these things together, and of course, the cooperation, the unfolding escalation, both mechanical complexity and narrative, added to that. But then, on the other side, for most games which are meant to be a replayable experience, I would almost posit that something like Hue by Chris Handy, which is a short thing, if that's a valuable, satisfying experience for you, yes, you can play it multiple times. And so many times I will go over to, well, not this week because but I would go over to Chris and McCall, we'd play things, or I'd show something to someone in the house, and it's very rare actually that we would not play something twice in a sitting, because if we actually enjoy the game, then okay, this is a good enough game, we will play it, and we will play it again. Do people want to play it again? I would always offer that choice, and I would say more often than not, people would say yes, because the first game, we're learning the rules, we're learning how to navigate it. The second game, we understand it, and now we can enjoy it at a different level. And then the third game, okay, now every game, board games are designed and intended to be replayable, that each time you can bring in new strategies, you can bring in new ways to play. And whether it's a 5-minute game or a half-hour game or even a 1-hour game, I mean, that replayability, I think, or even if it's Twilight's Imperium 4, which Colvin's asked to chat about next time they're here, which I'll look forward to hearing about why Colvin's basically, I'm going to use the word obsessed with this one game. But I get it, because when you are playing Dune, but that is a big commitment, and there can be joy in that unfolding narrative. But yeah, I'm very much on the same side as you.
Yeah, I think, I mean, not to extend this questionably quick question, but yeah, I think a couple of points. I agree with you with role play games, and again, like there's a barrier to entry. Like, it's nice to be the person in the group, the one person in the group who doesn't know the system and everyone else does. But if you all come into a new system together, it's really tough. And then systems like role play can be tricky as well. Like, if you're not used to it, like without the systems there to sort of support and give you direction, it becomes very freeform, which can be scary to play if you're not used to it. But I think you talked about going through a journey with a game, and like, I think I am missing something perhaps in my repertoire by not playing as many big, long games, because they do stuff, especially like Pandemic Legacy, where you have this unfolding mechanic, which, unless you play it for those hours, you can't see that slow mechanic unfold. So what, I mean, I'm unlikely to play it. I would like to play it, but I feel like I'm unlikely to play it. And I won't experience that slow unfolding mechanic. And then going back to your final point about learning, like I think that I had the best learning journey with Carcassonne, which I played with my housemates when I lived in Nottingham. And so we started learning it at the same time, and like, it was such an interesting journey in terms of sort of like how the methods we'd used to play kind of started. Like, we didn't understand the farmers at first, and then after a week or so, oh, farmers are really strong, and then we'd play like heavily on the farmers, and then you're like, no, I'm trapped with the farmers. Why am I doing farmers so soon? And then it like learning that like if you're playing a big group, you actually want to cooperate with everyone more than anyone else's, as opposed to competing with everyone. And it was like Carcassonne had a really good journey, and it was one of the early games in sort of like the sort of like new wave, or sort of, well, I guess it's not so new wave now, but like the sort of early noughties, mid noughties, sort of when I started going into games again after a childhood of playing card games with my grandparents after dinner when they'd come visit us, and playing Hero Quest and Warhammer and making up silly games in my living room with my brother, like smacking a tennis ball at each other. But yeah, I think there was a question that I missed. You did pop it up about...
Yeah, Alex, I want to kind of, respond. Yeah, I just want to share the love for Carcassonne, even though not everyone does. You know, there is definitely a journey of, you know, what you understand, especially if it's one of the first games that you're playing. Alex was asking, have you played a game that you thought would be better if it was longer?
Never. I can't think if, like, well, I don't know if... No. I can't think of one. I can think of plenty of games, like both digitally and maybe slightly less. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, definitely shorter games. I've been playing a game called Grindstone recently, a computer game, and it's just like I've got 1/3 of the way through it that I can see, like in terms of like the map layout, the spaces where you can see where you go, and I just like, oh, like if this was half the length, I would probably finish it and then do the daily challenge. But because it's not half the length, I'm not going to finish it, and I'm not going to keep playing it. And it's really hard. It's like some games like are addictive, like, or to me at least, where I have that sort of sense of completionist, and I do sort of have to get to a point where I have to actually ask, am I really enjoying this anymore? Or am I just doing this task because it's been set out in front of me?
Especially in video games, that can be a big thing with grinding. And look, I know Chrono Trigger is adored by so many people, but the only reason I finished Chrono Trigger, I'm going to be real here for a moment, is because I have a joypad that has auto fire, and in one section of the game, there's like a big conveyor belt where you go and fight for a bunch of enemies. And then, so you go through this conveyor belt and it has so many fights on it. And then you can sort of spend about 10 seconds going back to the start and doing that. So I would kind of get myself to a situation where I could just constantly press A. And this was something that I could grind out so that I could stand a chance at later levels. And the whole, for me, this notion that, okay, I get it. In a perfect setting, you could say, okay, there's two ways to victory. Either you are amazing with the way that you orchestrate your strategy in the game, or you are just going to grind a lot. And having these multiple paths, okay, there's some benefit to that, but it feels like too often there's just no way to win without doing that, having that prerequisite, spending more time than I actually enjoy. I'm not enjoying that in the moment. I'm just enjoying the output of it. And that is when it becomes work. I want to flag up, Yoda says there are some engine builders that end just when your engine is working properly. And this is the thing with, you might want to have the game ending a little bit later, but is that really something that you would appreciate? Because for sure, when I played Settlers of Catan, now known as Catan, I sometimes said, you know what, I would like to play to 2 more points because I'm really enjoying this game. I would like to have a tiny bit of more cities going on and whatnot. But if it was actually going to 11 points or 12 points rather than 10, then occasionally there's a game that I might enjoy a bit less. But interestingly, Xate actually did extend the game by about 50%. So, as I understand it, Judith and Xate both have a set of Steamworks, and they bought a third set or a second set for each of them to divide, so they each have 1.5 times. We only use them when playing each other because you need a feel for the game, or else the extra length benefits the other players too much, says Xate. And so maybe that's it, because with a board game, you're not only designing around an experienced player, you're also designing around a first-time player. And I honestly can't think of... Okay, actually, you know what? I can't think of a published game that was too short. But I can think of Wibble, because originally Wibble was about maybe 1 minute long, and that was very unsatisfying. Have you played Wibble, David? It's the one where you've got 2 cards in the center. You need to shout a word using one letter from each card in the center. You collect cards, and each card that you collect is a new obligation.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Originally, very, very originally, like the very first playtest, that was the way the game went. And then when someone got to 5 cards, they won. End of game. That was it. And so someone would win, and it was like, oh, well done. Well, that was a bit unsatisfying. And then the whole permanent obligation thing where you choose one of your cards in front of you, stop a little bit sooner, but you keep it there. That gives other people more of a chance to build up. It gives more of a flow to the game, because that was something where actually you do want it to last a wee bit longer. And I've been speaking to someone about something that I can't chat much about, but I can use a general principle, which is, imagine a game where you're quickly collecting cards and you want to have 10 people collecting these cards as quickly as they can. Well, if you've got 50 cards, that's 5 cards each. I mean, that's hardly satisfying. Okay, boom. Whereas if you've got 110, okay, at least it's 11 cards. You've felt some sense of satisfaction. And yeah, it's interesting. So
yeah, I guess, but that's part of the design process, isn't it? I think what tends to happen is sometimes there's this idea of value for money in cards, and it's tricky because as people make a living off it, they have to find a way that they can sell their games at a price point that makes them a living, so they can afford to live, but also at a price point where the players feel that they have got value for money as well. And so there's an interesting balance. I think for me, like, this brings to mind the game The Mind, where I think it's a fantastic game, but I also think that game has a load of excess bits and rules which don't add to the game. I think they make the game worse, personally. But I think they're added to it in order to give it a larger perception of being a game that isn't a deck going from 1 to 100.
You mean, are you referring mainly to the shurikens?
The shurikens, the lives, every card that isn't numbered from 1 to 100 is not needed, in my opinion. I house rule it, where we get the deck, we shuffle it, we start with 1 card each. If we successfully do that, we put those to the bottom of the deck, and then we take 2 cards each. If we're successful at that, we shuffle them, put them to the bottom of the deck. So you can actually use a little bit of memory for what numbers have come up, but like not enough. But if you fail at 3 cards, you shuffle them, put them at the bottom of the deck, and take another 3 cards each. Like, for me, and then you play until you get... The problem is, like, you have to have the flexibility to sort of go, okay, that's enough of that game now. Let's do something else. Like if you play it like that, there isn't a signifier for the end, other than you wanting to not play it anymore, which I guess in terms of games design isn't a good way to end your game. Stop playing when you stop having fun is not a rule that you really want to write. But it worked. I mean, for when I'm playing it, we just sort of do it like that, and it feels good. And then you sort of start to struggle a few too many times.
I think it's different though, because you are a game designer, and if you are someone who is able to curate that game experience, and you have an understanding of things, I mean, for anyone who actually puts thought into the rules of the game, I would be like, yeah, sure. If this game isn't working for you and your group, absolutely change the rules of my games, then make them work however works best for you. Mm-hmm. But having a notion of stop when the game isn't fun, I guess there's two issues with that. Firstly, there's a lot of people who want some sort of certainty and want some sense of closure, myself included. I would like to have it so that if I'm starting the game, then, okay, we've managed to do this, or we've actually failed. And maybe it's like, okay, when you hit one of the same cards again, maybe that could be it. It's like, but for me, I like to have this, okay, we didn't manage to do it, but well, but I do like this kind of, okay, you're playing on God mode, you just keep trying with 3, and then you keep trying with 7 or whatever. And the other aspect is that you have to have this sense of, are we able to communicate well enough to determine what is fun for our group? I mean, ideally, people should be able to, but are we? Are people able to be thoughtful enough? Are people able to be honest enough to say, okay, there's some people having fun, some people not having fun. Okay, we would be better off going to a different thing.
Yeah. I think if I gave it more thought, I think that I would say like 3 attempts at any level that you reach would probably be the way. If I had to write an official rule for it, I'd probably pick like X amount of attempts at any level. Thinking of games, now I'm thinking of more games where I thought they had too many rules and bits. Mysterium for me, it's been a while since I played it, but
I mean, that's an easy one for you. We don't need to go into it because, for those who don't know, Mysterium, okay, someone's like the ghost and are trying to guide people towards a certain conclusion and say, okay, my killer is in the kitchen, so I'm going to give you a cleaver. But the picture with a cleaver in it also has rabbits in it, so maybe someone else thinks that it's in the zoo. I don't know. Or in the menagerie, because they're like kind of weird Victorian-ish era rooms that no house would really have it. I mean, anyway, but I don't want this to just be think of games that are overly complicated.
Sorry, it's what I think about a lot.
And it gets down to a taste. I mean, do you think that you are represented? I will actually highlight Rob's points, which is really interesting. The second pivot, the first pivot is from first you build your engine, then you pivot to scoring your victory points, which is where you're scoring the victory points and then the minion ends, or you run that engine to score those victory points. Then the second pivot is to grinding. And I've not heard of this, but it seems to me that that second pivot would just be, okay, now you're firmly in the victory points and you're doing the same thing without any decisions. I mean, in theory, isn't scoring the victory points just the beginning of the grinding? I mean, I'm not familiar with this, but I don't know if there's a link that Rob has and would like to share with us. But it's definitely something to ponder. I would, in terms of other questionably quick questions, which these are very questionably quick, let's me ask quickly, what is the first game you remember playing?
It's probably somewhere between Chucky Egg on the BBC Micro for digital games, and then it's probably card games of some sort. I can't remember exactly what it was, but like I said, we used to play cards with my grandparents when they came to visit after meals, and
You're talking like trick-taking games like Hearts.
Yeah, trick-taking games, and Newmarket was one we played, and Rummy type games. Yeah, those sort of trick-taking games. Yeah, so those. I'm sure there were ones before that, like probably like Snakes and Ladders and other, and like Ludo, and then playing Risk with my brother and flipping the board when he was winning too much. Yeah.
Rob clarifies that's the point of the second pivot. Running your engine a couple of times is cool, but it quickly gets boring with no real decisions. And no worries about the lack of link. It seems to me like I get what you're saying. That sounds less like a pivot and more like going on too long after that pivots into running your engine. I mean, maybe this is me. It feels like, yeah, you build up your engine, you pivot into scoring your victory points, and then eventually, yeah, so there's one pivot, but eventually get bored. Okay, so what is the last game you played in real life?
I started playing a game. What was the last thing I played? I can't remember the title of it. It's something like The Incomplete Circle. It's a digital game. I'll be able to tell in a second if it's the Journey of the Broken Circle. Journey of the Broken Circle. It's a platforming game about a circle with a section of it missing, and it's sort of going on this adventure feeling incomplete, and the circle meets people along the way, or not people, meets other characters along the way, who then combine with the circle and give it different abilities. So like the mechanic ability changes as they meet different characters, but these sort of like represent relationships. So they meet someone who is sticky, so they can stick to walls and jump higher and stick between walls, but then that character always wants to stay where they are and doesn't want to move forward with the circle. And they meet someone else who's sort of like warm and comforting and wraps around them, so they sort of they end up being able to sort of like go through green and sort of stick to the walls a bit, but that person sort of like says, that's all I can do for your journey. There's another character who's a balloon who you are inflating, or who starts off being inflated, but then but sort of as the journey goes on, it becomes deflated, and you're sort of becoming responsible for keeping that person inflated. So it's all to do with like different types of relationships that you can have and finding the right person for you. Is sort of the thing. Lovely. It's kind of interesting.
The Unbroken Circle.
The broken. Let me just check again for you. The Journey of the Broken Circle.
The Journey of the Broken Circle.
Yeah, so that's a digital game. I've played a few games on Board Game Arena. I can't remember the last non-digital thing I've played. Been doing some playtesting for a project that I can't talk about, so that's not a really good starting point for a conversation.
Digital High Five.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It kind of worked. And the final questionably quick question, or maybe draw a bit more, is Dina asked earlier on, would you decorate your beard with baubles for Yule? I think this is a request rather than a question of do you actually do this? Although I want to know if you've ever actually done this, but also
I haven't. I mean, I think when my beard was bigger, I could have physically done it. I don't think I could do it now because it's not long enough to sort of like really give the hooks anything to grip onto. I've certainly sprayed glitter into my beard once or twice to give a bit more festive feel to it. I'm not opposed to the idea. I just don't think it would work at the moment. Maybe if I ever go for a big beard again, I could do then.
That is totally fair. And with that, I'm going to wrap up the so-called questionably quick questions section. And but you know, when we're meeting people, it just feels like, what does that even mean? The questionably quick questions. I used to have like, okay, these are the questions that I'm going to ask. But if I ask, okay, books or podcasts, what does that tell us? I just want to ask more about, you know, do you have any more thoughts about the ending of games? And so, yeah, if you have any comments, any questions, feel free to keep chucking them in. And we are going to carry on meeting David King for... Should I have written Dr. David King? Would you have preferred it if I'd referred to you as a doctor?
No, it's weird. I mean, when I was doing the doctorate, I was like, I can't wait to change my credit cards, change I don't think you even put it on your passport, but in my mind, I thought I could. And I was like, I'm going to change all my documents. And then when it happens, you just sort of like, that seems like a bit of work, and it seems kind of pretentious. Sort of like make people call me doctor. It's just sort of like, do I really want to do that? The only reason that I put doctor on my Twitter handle is because like David and King is such a common name that I couldn't find a reasonable variant of it. And even adding doctor, I had to do sort of weird stuff with underscores to make it sort of unique. But still
so Dr. D King with no underscores is not... Someone else has that already on Twitter?
I think so. I can't I remember looking for a while to try and find something that would work.
Lovely to see you, Jay. Thanks for joining us. We're just meeting this lovely person who... Yep, you can... We've also been chatting about ending games and, you know, how the engine building can turn into a grind. And I guess that is so subjective. And I guess the other thing to consider there is if you're actually making any meaningful decisions about how to run your engine to get those victory points. Because I look at Chocolate Factory, where Chocolate Factory, you've got your engine, and even at the end, I think that yes, you've got your little piece, but it's how you use those finite resources, because your resources are literally never enough, and there is no way to get more coal than what your daily allowance. You're going to get, like, maybe it's 5, 6, 7, 8, blah, blah, blah. And then it goes up by 1 each day, but you will never get enough coal to do everything you want to do. So maybe you take a bit of machinery that costs a bit less coal but isn't as good, or maybe you decide, okay, I'm going to just ignore this one bit of chocolate. I'm not going to upgrade it at all, and I'm just going to turn that back into coal. Or maybe the other thing that's really nice about Chocolate Factory, and I am biased because I did art direction and I tweaked a couple of numbers on that game. That was one of the last games I worked on behalf of Alley Cat Games. But yeah, Matthew, brilliant design from Matthew and Brett Gilbert. What I find really interesting is that you're turning your chocolates into... You know, you're using them to fulfill contracts, but you don't want to just get the best chocolates. You need to have specific chocolates. Do you know what I mean? And so it's like, okay, maybe I want to have all these yellow things. Okay, maybe I want to have the blue things on a subsequent turn, which is even better. But on a later turn, maybe I just want to have all the chunky chocolates, which are completely different. And yeah, I find that really interesting. And that mixture of contract fulfillment and not just a one-to-one ratio of what your engine gives you, but to victory points. Having this intermediary is actually really, really clever, I think. And yeah.
Yeah, chocolate. I agree with that. Like, yeah. Like, thinking of chocolate, I spent a while a couple of years ago going around London to try lots of different hot chocolates, and to try and find like some of the best hot chocolates in London. And as a games designer, I've always wanted to try and combine my love of chocolate and games, and I've never found a way to do it because the love of chocolate isn't from the systematic structure of creating or buying chocolate. It's in the eating. So like,
yes.
So like, I don't think I could ever derive the same. It's a different type of pleasure.
Well, you've got Chocolate Monopoly and Chocolate Trivial Pursuit, and there was this one game that I saw at UK Games Expo where the person had these mini party games, and like one of the there was a tin with holes in it, and some of the holes were too small for the chocolates to roll through. They were individually wrapped little balls, and one of them you had to get certain colors of chocolates to fall through the hole in the middle, and then if you got the right colors, you'd get to eat them. And every type of challenge, you would collect the chocolates, but then you'd get to eat them. So it's like the joy of overcoming the challenge, and then you get to eat the chocolates that you collect.
Obviously, you really hope to overcome the challenge to
get
the yeah, maybe that's the solution to.
And say it, for example, makes chocolate chess on a checkered white and dark chocolate cake.
Yeah.
I agree, Jay Folsgaard. That is neat. Or were you referring to the thing at UK Games Expo that I mentioned? This was like really ages ago. And, obviously, like edible board games are a thing. Like Sandercock and Catherine Morgan, who I've had on before, who had like the poisoned chocolates. It's not actually poisoned. It's just there's one thing that you for the game don't want to eat, but you get to eat all the other chocolates as the course of the game. And it's. Have you ever explored edible game design space?
I haven't, and I think it's something that maybe I should look at. And then, but the other thing you can do is you can just play a game and have a bar of chocolate next to you. So that's how you could make your own edible game. Just combine two activities at once, and I think they're different enough that you could combine them. While standing in the sea, no, I think that would be too much. I think the sea needs to be left alone.
I mean, you could definitely play some games whilst in the sea, like something with heavy pieces, like Hive with its bake-like pieces might. It depends how strong the tides are.
Yeah. Or some inflatable pieces.
Like maybe Yogi. But the problem with Yogi, honestly, is that if you're playing it in water, there is the risk of drowning. So please don't drown because of Yogi. Lots of love, Yoda. It's lovely to see you. I am so tempted to get this chocolate bar that I've got. It's Absolute Black. It's you've got to translate that, Yoda. I trust you, so I'm going to let it fly, but weinig bijzonder ich in EU en Hilse. That wasn't for us, says Xate. So who was it for? I mean, do you speak Dutch?
I don't.
So, that was the wrong screen, apparently. Okay, that's fair enough. Do you want me to time you out? Do you want me to delete all your stuff, Dutch, or is it? Oh, you can actually, I think. But anyway. Also, I should say, Xate, if you delete stuff, then it doesn't get deleted on my screen. So, unfortunately, the way that StreamYard works, I don't actually see what's being deleted on this screen. But, what's the darkest chocolate that you've ever had? And whilst you're saying that, I am going to get my chocolate.
Okay. The darkest chocolate is 100% chocolate, 100% cocoa. Oh, is it cocoa solids? I don't know. Whatever the 100% is. I can't remember. I've tried it twice. Once was from a chocolate shop. The other time, a friend had it in the office and offered me some. I got to say, it's probably too much. 100%. I'm happy with a 90. 90 is about right for me. But anywhere, anything above 75, I'll have. And if I'm really desperate.
So wait, are you saying that you will just refuse milk chocolate?
I try not to have it as much. The problem is, like, I started having dark chocolate, and if I have milk chocolate, and I've been trying to sort of like cut down on the amount of like milk and dairy that I have as much as I can, but I'm still tempted away. The problem is, if I get milk chocolate, I would literally, a whole bar would last me like 5 seconds, because it's so moreish. Like, I
believe you figuratively, but 5 seconds, literally. Yeah. I challenge that.
Not 5. Okay. Like,
I understand.
Bar, like one sitting. Then.
Oh, you mean you mean one of those? Oh, do you mean a big like?
Sort of 100 grams.
Yeah, like that sort of size.
Yeah, that would last me like half a day, instead of where if I get dark chocolate, I can probably get a week out of it if I'm not on a massive chocolate rush.
The value and enjoyment to calories is negative for milk chocolate, says Xate. That sounds very scientific. You know, I might just not even eat this, but so the 100% that I had is Montezuma's Absolute Black. It's 100% cocoa. I had before this 99% cocoa from Lindt, which was very nice. And I mean, when you sniff it, it's just got such a lovely. Sorry, I know this is a bit loud. I have like one tiny bit of it. Like, there's just. It's amazing how the process adds so much to it. It's not just like eating unrefined cocoa. There's a lot going on. And there is definitely a sweetness somehow. And there's almost like notes of citrusy flavor. And it's interesting, when I was working in a really expensive shop, and I think once per year, they gave us 40% off everything. This was meant to be the thank you employees. And you get 40% off anything up to a maximum of £1,000. I think they don't want you to like end up buying everything and then, you know, selling it on. Obviously, that is something that could be done if you've suddenly got 40% off whatever you want. You know, it's like I had all these single source cocoa things, and you can definitely taste the difference when it's like 85%. And yeah, what would you say is your, bringing it back to board games, do you think there's something similar to milk chocolate, like, or all those cartoon violence films where you will just play a lot of it but then feel no satisfaction? Do you know what I mean?
I mean, I don't think so. I don't think I play games in the same way. Yeah, I can't think of an example of like what is sort of like just an enjoyably bad game. Like, not, it's really tricky because it's hard to sort of say like what I mean by 6 out of 10 in terms of sort of like the film. I think people know what I mean, because like that is how the internet really communicates, and how reviewers communicate about films, and they grade them, which I don't think is actually a really good thing to do. I think reviews would be more interesting if they didn't.
I mean, you need to have. I don't think that the notion of playability, graphics, audio, like magazines used to have, is necessarily the best way to do it.
Yeah.
But I think that, you know, you try to grade things based on what it's trying to be, and try to communicate what it's trying to be, and be like, okay, reliability to finish within a certain time period for this game is terrible. But if that's not an issue for you, hey ho.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's simplicity, accessibility for those with cognitive problems. Lots of stuff to ponder. How good is this game at being a game with lots of stuff to ponder? How good is this game at getting you to perform, at allowing you to be the center of attention? How good is this game at allowing a variety of experiences? Maybe someone wants that variety of experiences. Maybe someone just wants something that's a bit more homogenous, that it's always going to be a bit similar. It's a bit more like comfort food.
I guess one thing I could
yeah,
think of,
eating that chocolates, it's like, yes, there is the interesting thing for me is that I'm just going to do, in review, Montezuma's Absolute Black, and I'm not sponsored by them or anything. It's actually sweeter than Lint, 99% for sure, I would say, which I find really interesting. There's definitely a joy in me eating this, but I could easily eat this within a day if I, was like, okay, I don't care about the calories, I don't care about what's good for my body. I would enjoy it. I would almost always enjoy eating double the amount of food I do. I really like food. I like the way it tastes, but now it's like, yeah, I've enjoyed it, but there's no calorific cost to playing a game, is there? There's only the time cost.
Yeah. I mean, time is the one thing that is definitely limited in the sort of spectrum of the things you can do with your life. And I think if you enjoy it, then it doesn't really matter. Like, I guess that's the thing. Like,
I guess the only question really is, are you playing this out of a sense of compulsion, or are you playing it out of a desire to enjoy that? Because, look, I've played... okay, I downloaded Zombie Tsunami, inspired by the board game, ironically, even though it was meant to go the other way. And it's not that great a game. It's like a endless runner, and there's a couple of interesting bits, but there's a whole grinding system. And what I'm finding is that I'm enjoying listening to a podcast whilst doing that. Now, would I be better off, actually, now I think about it, having a walk whilst listening to that podcast? Maybe I would, but having some relative downtime where I'm feeling like, okay, I'm just going to sit in here, and really, maybe I am playing it out of a sense of compulsion, because this applies less to board games, but more when you get into all these clicker games and, okay, we're going to give you more experience points, more of this. I mean, maybe legacy games and those campaign games are the closest that we've got to clicker bait.
Possibly, in that sort of you are pushed through them a little bit, but they feel different to me. I think also, like, the other side of board games is they're social compared to sort of single player digital games. I know you can have single player board games as well, but I'm kind of willing to sit round a table and play a game I'm not as keen on with people I want to spend time with. Where I question why, with some digital games, why am I still playing this? Like, and then like I put it down, and then hopefully I'll either not pick it up again, or I'll realize why I did want to play it. But like, it's kind of interesting, like you were talking about clicker games, and there's the game where there's a couple that I've played. One is like, I think, a Paperclip Factory, that's a browser game, and one is the one with potatoes, where you're taking over space.
The Paperclip Factory is an interesting one, because that's almost using the medium to make some weird statement. although it's mostly in reflection of what's actually happened, that comes across. I don't think that during the playing of the game, I really got the sense of, okay, wow, I'm taking over the world, and then everything is... it's... I don't know, there's definitely something interesting there, but is it a... I don't know, worthwhile is such a hard thing, and it's such a strong value judgment to say, oh, is this game worthy? Should this have been published? And like, who am I to decide?
Oh yeah, I don't think I would stop things being published. I mean, there might be a line I draw for some things in terms of if they cause harm, but well, I think what's interesting for me about those idle clicker games, or even sort of like the ones where you're just grinding, is that there's some people, and myself included, up to a degree where I've started to notice it in myself in order to stop myself doing it, is that sometimes you just like to watch numbers get bigger. And I think...
So, I mean, it's part of why we get addicted to social media.
Yeah. Yeah, like, why is it that we like... I don't know if it's all humans, so I can only speak for myself, but something about numbers getting bigger and seeing that changing numbers, and like, oh, I've got this many more numbers today. Like, why is that pleasurable? It's strange, and it's only when you sort of like reflect back on it and you sort of think, oh, I'm just watching numbers go up. Why is this triggered something in me, or why is this connected to something on me? And it kind of makes me think about like understanding why people become obsessed with like earning more and more money, or having more and more money, and it's sort of like when the numbers are so astronomical, and you're like, you've got enough numbers now. People need some of those numbers to do some basic living. Like, maybe if you didn't have all of those numbers. But yeah.
Yeah, and I've kind of done this as well in my channel because I set up stream elements. And it's like, okay, now, you know, for when you're watching, you're going to get some points. And I was going to set up a thing which, you know, if you don't mind me kind of explaining what I'm planning for the next couple of weeks. So what I was thinking, sorry, I love this. All right, there were points. Whatever. Yeah, you're too cool, of course. We all know this.
I've done that. When I've played a game and just ripped up the point sheet at the end and just go, points didn't matter. Some people get upset by that.
I like having the points sheets. I mean, for me, one thing I like actually more about Ticket to Ride New York compared to Ticket to Ride London, and I didn't think I would be saying this before I got it, I didn't think I would appreciate a little score pad, but I do. And the reason I appreciate it is because it's a memento of all those times that I've played. And for London, I've almost started thinking maybe I should just write on the inside of the box every time I play it, hey, here's who won. And if I ever give that game away to someone else, well, sure, it might devalue the game a little bit, but who cares to some extent? It's a memento of this is who played the game. Now, if we look at games as artifacts in the same way that books are, I don't think I've got any really old books here, but, you know, I've definitely read some books that have been more than 100 years old. And there's something amazing when you have that. And there's something amazing when you're playing a board game that's so old that things are falling apart and things are from another era. And yeah, Rob mentions the Scythe achievement sheet, which I wasn't aware of. I have played Scythe, but for whatever reason, I don't remember anyone actually writing anything on this achievement sheet. Maybe the person who owned the game back then wanted to keep their achievement sheet pristine. And for sure, I would like some system of, even after X years, we will still be able to play it. And for sure, Ticket to Ride New York, if that copy is still looked after in 100 years, for example, I think the scoring is simple enough that you'll be able to say, okay, we'll use another little sheet of paper. And you've got some references to it in the instructions. So it's like, okay, well, you count up the trains, you count up the tickets, and you get some bonus points potentially. That's it. You can write it on its own bits of paper, but having it there, it's a memento. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
I think that's interesting in terms of like two things. In terms of sort of like, at some point, some historian is going to look back at these board games, and I think
maybe.
but like finding ones which have messages in and have meaning in for a person are more significant, possibly in the future, as opposed to, like, I guess there's two types of collectors. One who wants the pristine box that's vacuum sealed, never been opened, and that's where they seek value in collecting. But then there's sort of like the historical artifact, which talks about a group of people, a family, a group of friends, and their ongoing weekly game of Carcassonne, where they've tracked the score in their lid for like 20 years. And I imagine finding something like that would feel really valuable.
Yeah, and it's like having these memories. I mean, it's a big part of why we take photos. And in my Instagram, I try to make that personal because, and hopefully Instagram will stay up, because there's something really nice about being able to look back. I lost my laptop. It was literally stolen from me, and I hadn't backed up my data. I was a bit annoyed at losing one game that I got from Yoast, which I had bought just that day. Basically, I had a bag stolen, and it had my laptop. It had a board game that I'd just gotten. It had playtest notes, because I was just coming back from a playtest. And yeah, I was obviously upset at the financial implications of that. I was also upset at the violation of that. I was also upset at losing all my playtest notes, all my work, all the LDEC games that I'd written down, that some of them I might not be able to recreate, but, you know, if they're good enough, I'll remember them eventually. And the thing that bothered me the most was all the photos, all the videos that I had on that hard drive, because you've got all these memories, and there's something lovely about having this physical artifact, all these memories that remind you of these moments that you've spent together. Because ultimately, board games, whether you're playing them on your own or with other people, they are experience engines. They are to facilitate something. And it has been such a wonderful conversation. I do think we need to wrap up soon. But yeah, Rob talking about playing a box of unlocked games, writing results in the box lid, and then passing it on to friends and suggesting that they do likewise. And I would love to be part of that chain. And I love the fact that these games can be passed on. And, you know, there is something about destructible games where, yes, I can understand Pandemic Legacy. Okay, maybe it's good enough. And I'm not saying that it shouldn't have existed, but we do have to really start thinking about our environmental footprint. And it is a difficult thing.
Also, you've got to think of, environmental footprint. But also, like, I think it's going to take a bit of change in people's sort of way of thinking. But like, you could almost imagine, like, someone is the initial box buyer, and then you pass it on, and then either sort of like you just make a small donation to the, like, it's not sort of like they're not going to come around and like take it off you if you don't make the donation, but like maybe a suggested site where you can sort of say like, hey, if you've passed this game on, and make a donation. I was thinking about, I don't know how it would work in a physical sense or even digitally how you'd set it up, but this idea of like passing games on where you'd be able to sort of like pay a small fee to sort of like gift the game to someone else. I don't know, because I mean, people are working, people have made something, and they should, whilst we live with the system we do, they need recuperating for it. So like we have to balance these environmental factors with people's ability to live. And it's kind of interesting when you sort of see people's shelves, really impressive collections, and it's almost like a personal library instead of a public library, and it's sort of that balance of how much time does each one of those.
So with the whole kind of giving away donation, were you trying to kind of work out in your mind as you were talking some sort of library system?
I guess so. Yeah, some way that like, because I mean, I guess they've done tool shares and stuff like that in places where you have like a community shed which is filled with like gardening tools or home DIY tools, because like not everyone needs their own drill. Like you don't, unless you're sort of like in the trade or you're actively making every day, you don't really need your own drill. You need to be able to get hold of a drill occasionally. I guess that's rental stuff and things, but from a like, yeah, it's a really interesting sort of discussion point in terms of sort of like, as a designer, should I be making things that add further impact to the world? And it's sort of really sort of tricky. But then like, we can't just do nothing. We can't do nothing with our lives. Like just sit in complete isolation. I think we should have things. And so and then there's the balance. Do you design things so you're talking about edible games. So like they're games that are almost designed to perish, but like perish in a biological way. Or do you make games that are solid, that will last forever? Like they're made out of, I don't know, something really robust that never rots away and exists forever. And is that good because it will never sort of fade away and it'll always exist? Or is that bad because it never fades away? Or like is cardboard, lots of little bits of cardboard rotting away? I don't know. It's complicated.
Yeah, it's a difficult thing. And I think that the notion of environmental impact and sustainability and how long games can last, that's a really good discussion that if you're willing to come on again in a few weeks' time, I would love to have you on.
Yeah.
Like
it'd be entirely uninformed opinion. I can offer that.
But I mean, this is it. Like sometimes I just really enjoy having these blathers and seeing where they go. Maybe invite a couple of other people if we've got like a more focused topic. It has been lovely meeting you, of course. And hello, Cuttlefish. It's lovely to see you. And hello, Matthew. You're making it just for the end of the show, as I was about to wrap up. Now, we've talked about so much today. Oh, wow. There we go. Matthew is annoyed that Matthew missed it. A huge fan of your work, David. So you will be able to go back and watch it on YouTube. It is going to be permanently up from now, I think, technically. Like, I think you can actually just go to it and start watching the very start. But we talked about... Oh, man, my writing's really bad. We talked about nicknames. We talked about teaching stuff. We talked about given names and boundaries. We talked about beards and making music and how, what teaching and what all these sorts of things. We talked about jam together and redefining terms to lead to new creations. We talked about making something playful is what you advise our students to do, about playfulness as an idea, about long-term versus short-term enjoyments, which you initially proposed as critically acclaimed, but I kind of argued against. We talked about the length of games. We talked about Chucky Egg and the journey of the broken circle. We talked about what Rob originally called a second pivot, but was really about engine building going on about it too long after you've pivoted from engine building into gathering victory points, and it just becomes grinding. About the end game in general, about we talked about your game, Matt. We talked about being a doctor. We talked about Chocolate Factory. I said some nice things about it. And we talked about edible game design. We talked about making chocolates. Then I ate some dark chocolates, and we talked about how milk chocolates is kind of like a clicker game, and playing out for a sense of completion, watching numbers getting bigger. We talked about points. We talked about points versus tracking it on a bits of paper, writing them on boxes, memories and paper in games, and then we finished talking about the environment. Oh, wished. Use. Okay, anyway, we have talked about so much. It has been lovely. And now, if you want to check out David, then you can check them out on all those links, which I also put onto all the social medias. And so, where do you like to be found?
You find me on Twitter, probably. The WordPress site's a little bit out of date, but I occasionally come back to it. But if you're into digital stuff, and I've got a couple of board game things, or playable Christmas things as well on Itch, and the top one there.
And if you want to find me, I am stuffbybez.com, stuffbez.bicker.com if you wish to buy my stuff. But if you buy anything physical, I'm not sending it out until next year. Twitter.com/stuffbez, Instagram.com/stuffbez, Twitch.tv/stuffbez. I stream every day at 10 a.m. UK time, and that's it for the next couple of weeks. I am not doing a Tuesday thing. Please take note of that. As in, I am streaming at 10 a.m. UK time tomorrow, but not in the evening, because I normally do 8 streams a week. But for this week, I've only got 7 scheduled streams, which is me taking a break. So you can check out YouTube for the old things and stuffbybez.com/Discord. And Bez and Friends Game Day will resume on 9th of January. And I want to thank you, everyone. You have been a wonderful guest. You have all been wonderful people. Thank you for watching. And now over to you. What are you up to? You can share anything you want to. So, yeah.
Back to work for a little bit, and then it's holiday. A few days holiday. I'm very ready for holiday. I've been the most ready I am for holidays. It felt like our Easter break and summer break didn't really exist this year with all the prep and planning. But that and eating chocolate and watching more 6 out of 10 Christmas films, and hopefully as we get closer to Christmas, we'll get closer to quality Christmas films. We'll save a couple of the highlights for then. So like Muppets Christmas Carol and Home Alone, and stuff like that for around peak Christmas feeling.
That sounds lovely.
Yeah.
Matthew is going to watch the rest of this stream. Xates is going to embark on a mission of spite and drawing Rob and Matthew in chocolates and in milk, melting it again. And I am going to set up tomorrow's stream, because I'm doing that on a day-to-day thing. I think that tomorrow I am going to be streaming at least 1 hour of just random instrumental noises, let's say. I will be hitting buttons with my fingers that will make some sort of noises on a keyboard. I'm not promising anything that could be called music, but it will hopefully pleasant enough to listen to. What I was going to say was that for sorry about this, and for Tuesday through to next Tuesday, I think Tuesday again, I've got a thing. I'm going to. I was thinking what I could do. Okay, tell me if this is a terrible game thing. So it's more of a playful activity than a game. But I'm going to come up with a bunch of activities, and anyone in my Discord between now and tomorrow is allowed to nominate let's say 3, and then I put them all into a figurative hat, and then people would pay some number of points. And then if they pay some number of points, let's say 500, if you pay 500 points, then I will take out one of the things that people have suggested out of the hat, and I will attempt to do it, whether it's singing a particular song or whatever. So and then if you haven't put your thing into the hat by 9 a.m.-ish tomorrow, then you'll have to pay some points to put things into the hats. That's what I was thinking. So it'll be like, okay, and then at the end, anything that I actually enjoyed doing, I will put back into the hat. That's the way I figured it would go. It's just a way of trying to get, you're not voting on anything, you're just suggesting things that you want to see me do, like just free ideas for things that you would like me to do. And then occasionally it'll be like, hey, Bez, do one of those things. And then I will rummage around and take one of the things. So if you're literally the only person to put things into this hat, then it'll always be one of your things that comes out of the hat.
Sounds fun.
Sate wants me to, this is within the duration of the stream, just to clarify. This is within the duration of the 10 a.m. to 12 noon, and I should be finishing up. But do you think that seems reasonable, Ding?
Yeah,
sorry, David
sounds
King.
like fun.
Okay, so put it into the hats. If you want to, then go onto Discord and add it onto the Discord, and I will do that. And tomorrow I'll be doing I am been chatting to my dad, I will quite possibly be playing some 2-player games with my dad. We'll see how we get on, and yep, that is what I am looking forward to. I am also going to definitely go outside today and have a bit of a walk. Before I do any of that, I am going to first spend about an hour finishing off some writing, sending 3-4 games to anyone who's interested in helping me playtest and evaluate some games for the LDEC design contest. None of them are solo games. The games range from 2 to 4 players, but I think all of them can be played with 2 players. So if you're interested, then please let me know, and I would love to have you join the judging / committee, which is just basically a bunch of people saying, oh, this is what I thought of these games. And I kind of pondered it quite deeply as to which games are the best. But yeah, Ding, can I entice you into joining?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I'll play something.
Awesome. Do I have your email?
Yeah, you've got a way of contacting me.
I mean, do I have a way of sending you files, though?
Yeah, I can drop you my email.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. I will be emailing you later today, and I'm excited to hear your thoughts. So that is it for us. I am not going to bother doing the raid, but for next streams, this isn't going to tell you anything, but I'm going to be playing music tomorrow. There's also going to be very much inspired by Elaine Black. Sorry, I can't pronounce Elaine's surname. I am going to be singing a song about board games and people. It's like going to be a little game every day where the person who guesses first will get like 1,000 points, and then everyone who guesses within like 5 minutes will get 500 points, something like that. And so that's actually making sure that people have enough points to make me do things if they really want to, or whatever. Do you know what I mean? That seems reasonable. Feel free to share, spread the word. Ding, is there anything left that you want to say?
Thanks very much for having me. It was a pleasure to talk to you for a couple of hours about games and chocolate and other stuff, and just allowing the conversation to take the form that it does. Do I accept bribes? What percentage of chocolate are we talking about?
Oh, that's such a dangerous thing to say. You know that Sate does chocolate tarts. With that, no. Anyway, it's not just the voting. I mean, I'm not just because someone votes for something doesn't mean that it's going to win. I have the final say, and if I suspect anyone of bribing,
yeah, if this chocolate smears all over the notes.
Oh no, you heard it was 70% minimum. That's not good enough, Sate. You need to up your percentage. And hello, another PG fan of the RPG.
Yeah.
But I want to say for now, the only thing left to say is bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. And bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. We'll have another hello. But for now, bye, bye. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. For now, it's time to go.
Cheerio.
Bye 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 bye. Bye bye.